Alright, in this lesson we're going to talk about factoring trinomials. These trinomials are going to be of the form x squared plus bx plus c, and in particular, our x squared is not going to have a coefficient in front. So in order for us to think about this and actually understand what's happening, we need to think about multiplication first, because if I have a trinomial, one of the ways to get a trinomial is by multiplying two binomials together. When you learned how to multiply binomials together, you probably learned the acronym FOIL, or it may be that you just learned to use the distributive property. Both of these methods do the exact same thing. It's just a different way of thinking of the same sort of operation. Whichever way you want to think of it, we are going to do x times x, which is x squared. We're going to do x times negative 5, which is negative 5x. We're going to do 3 times x, which is 3x. And then we're going to do 3 times negative 5, which is negative 15. And to finish the problem, we would add the middle terms together and get x squared minus 2x minus 15. So today's lesson, we're going to start with this, and we're going to try to work our way backwards to get to this. And that might seem like a really hard thing to do at first, but it's actually not that bad. If I have a trinomial that I'm trying to factor, then I'm going to need two sets of parentheses. And in the first set of parentheses, or not the first set of parentheses, in the first part of my parentheses should go what I multiply together to get x squared. Because think about how we got this from this. We did x times x and we got x squared. So think about how you can split up x squared. Really, our only choice is to split it up into x and x. And then think about how we got this negative 15. We're going to come back to the negative 2 in a second. We got this negative 15 by doing 3 times negative 5. And so that suggests that in this spot should go numbers that multiply together to get negative 15. Now, we know the answer is 3 and negative 5, but how come it's not 1 and negative 15, which also multiplies to get negative 15? That has to do with these middle terms, that we added positive 3 and negative 5 together to get negative 2. So what that is implying to us is that this spot right here that we're trying to fill in are numbers that multiply to get negative 15 and add to get negative 2. So we're going to generalize this to all of our factoring problems today, that we can split up the x squared or whatever letter it may be into the first spot. That part should be easy. And then the numbers we pick are going to be what multiplies to get the number that doesn't have an x with it and adds to get the number that does have an x with it. So let's check this out. We have x squared plus 5x plus 6. We know we need two parentheses because a trinomial is going to factor into two parentheses. We are going to split the x squared up into x and x. And then we're going to split the 6 up into two things that multiply to get 6, that add to get 5. Now there's only really a couple options to multiply to get 6, right? 1 and 6 and 2 and 3. And if I want them to add together, I can just do 1 plus 6 and get 7, 2 plus 3 and get 5, and I can pick out which one of those is right. So the pair I need are 2 and 3, which means that I'm going to add 2 and I'm going to add 3. And it doesn't matter which order you write these in. It would be just as fine to write x plus 3 first and x plus 2 second. Either of these answers is correct. So as we go through the rest of the problems, I recommend that you pause the video and try it yourself. It can be really frustrating as you're doing this, that it may be that you can't think of all of the factor pairs of a number, and so I'll try to help you with a strategy for being able to do that. That if we can't find all the factor pairs at first and we can't seem to find the right one, it can make these problems feel almost impossible. But it is possible. You can do it. I believe in you. So let's look at example 2. Now actually example 2 has some other way in which they're trying to trick us. You can factor it this way, where you're thinking about what multiplies to get 15 going in the first spot of each parentheses, and what's what multiplies to get x squared would then go in the second one. And so what multiplies to get 15, we need it to add to get -8. That is all still going to be true. It may be easier if we rearrange it though. Maybe it's easier to think of it with the x squared first and the 15 last. It really doesn't matter which way you do it. We can get an answer that's correct. All of the answers will look slightly different depending on which way we choose to do it. If I choose to look at this right here, since it's similar to what I had a moment ago, I'm going to split the x squared up into x and x, and I'm going to split the 15 up into what multiplies to get 15 that adds to get -8. Now if I think of the factors of 1 and 15, of 15, it's 1 and 15 and 3 and 5. But neither of those pairs adds to get +8. 3 and 5 add to get, neither of them adds to get -8. 3 and 5 adds to get +8. So what do I do to make that negative? Well, I have to remember what my multiplication rules are with negative. My multiplication and addition rules are. Because I can do -3 times -5, and that will still give me a +15. And if I add -3 and -5, that will give me a -8. So if this is a positive number, either both of my numbers need to be positive, because a positive times a positive is positive, or they both need to be negative, because a negative times a negative is positive. The way I decide whether I want them to be positive or negative is based on this number, because if I want to add and get a positive, everything should be positive. If I want to add and get a negative, then they would both have to be negative. So this is -3 and -5. It is helpful to double check here and say, okay, if I multiply these numbers together, do I get +15, which I do, and then try adding them together. So if I add them together, do I get a -8, which I do, and so that would make our answer be correct. Let's look at, actually I want to go back. The other way of writing this, if you didn't think about rearranging it, you would probably put the 3 and the 5 first. And so either you could just literally switch it around like this, and that would be fine. Or it actually also works to have it like this, 3 minus x and 5 minus x. And if you're not sure why, try foiling those out and see if you can get back to the original answer. It's always helpful to check yourself on these because it's something that we know how to do. It's relatively easy to do, so check it and see if that seems right. Example 3, what multiplies to get -72 that adds to get 21? This one is a tricky one, or it might be a tricky one, because a lot of things go into 72. When you are faced with a number that has a lot of options and you don't think of the right one right off the bat, the best thing to do is make a list of pairs. And I personally do it very strategically. I start with 1 and the number, and then I check to see if 2 divides in, which since it's even, it does. And then I check 3, which 3 into 72 goes 24 times. And then I just keep going until I come up with the right thing. 4 goes in 18 times, and so on. And eventually, I don't know, we can't have that many left, but 8, we have 6 and 12. 7 doesn't work, 5 doesn't work, 8 and 9 work. Now, one of these has to be the right thing, but notice that it multiplies to get a -72. So actually what should happen is one of the 2 of these should be negative. So the way to decide which should be negative is that we're adding to get 21, which is positive, and so we want the bigger number to be positive and the smaller number to be negative, because we want -1 plus 72, which gives me a positive answer, not -72 plus 1, which gives me a negative answer. So if we think through our options here and try to figure out which one of these is going to give us 21, oh, it's this one. -3 plus 24 equals 21. It's very easy to mess this up and and mix up the signs and put the negative with the 24 instead of the 3. So you have to be able to think through this idea of, do I want the 3 to be negative, or do I want the 24 to be negative? Which of these gives me a positive like I want? It's the one that I have the bigger number being positive. So this right here is our answer for example 3. Example 4 and example 5, we're going to take it a step farther. On example 1 through 3, it just asked us to factor, so we were just putting it into parentheses. In this case, we now have an equation because we have an equal sign. And since we have an equal sign, they're asking us to go all the way to the point where we know what x equals. So this is kind of the reason, one of the reasons why we factor, is it's a method for solving equations. So what I want to do here is I want to split this up. I want to put the x squared as x and x. I want to think about what multiplies to get negative 24, that adds to get negative 5. Again, it might be helpful to go through and make a list. And you can either check the list as you go along, or you can make the whole list and then go back and check, depending on which seems easier to you. 3 and 8 are 5 apart, so that's probably our best bet. Is it that we want to do negative 3 plus 8, or do we want to do negative 8 plus 3? Which of those gives us a negative 5? It's the second one. We want the bigger number to be negative so that we get negative 5. So this is going to be minus 8 and plus 3. But we're not done like we would have been on the previous problem. We want to know what the answer for x is. We want to know, how can x minus 8 times x plus 3 equal 0? What numbers make that true? This is from a previous lesson that we did, 10.4, where we said we want to take this and say, what makes this equal 0? So what number, when I plug it in, makes this 0, which would be a positive 8? And the same thing right here. What number is going to make x plus 3 be equal to 0, which would be negative 3. If you're having trouble coming up with that, all we're doing is solving a very simple equation in the broad scheme of things. That we want to add the 8 over or subtract the 3 over, and that gives us the opposite of what we had in our parentheses, a positive 8 and a negative 3. And you'll notice that should happen every time, so that it may be that we don't even have to do any work to realize that our answers are the opposite of what we have in our parentheses. One more, and so this one we have a step to do before we factor, because in order to factor we want everything to be on one side. So we actually need to add this 9 over to the left and get x squared plus 6x plus 9 equals 0. As I rewrote it, I put it in the order I wanted it to be, because x squared needs to split into x and x, and 9 needs to split into what multiplies to get 9 and adds to get 6, so 3 and 3. And so if I think about what makes x plus 3 equal 0, I hopefully realize that I'm going to get the same answer twice, and so I would subtract 3 from both sides and get x equals negative 3. I could write it down twice, or I could just write it down once as my answer, which is just x equals negative 3.
If you like this video, please hit the thumbs up, and feel free to check out other videos. I've suggested one somewhere on the screen. If you want to know when I post new videos, hit the subscribe button, and you can also follow me on Twitter at KSteveMath. If you have a math question that I haven't answered, tweet me a picture, and I'll try to answer it. Thanks for watching!